This video is kindly brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to create a beautiful online presence. Hi, my name's Janelle and welcome back to Rosery Apparel. In this video, I'm going to be attempting to duplicate this thrifted dress. I picked up this dress from an op shop, I think it was towards the end of last year, and I am obsessed with the style of it. It's got everything I love in a dress. It's got puffy sleeves, a little bit of shirring at the back, and as soon as I saw it, I decided I would take it home with me. But the only thing about this dress that I'm not 100% crazy about is the fabric of it. But I decided to pick it up anyway because I figured I could potentially have a go at duplicating it, which is what I'm going to be doing in this video. The fabric I'm going to be making the duplicate of this dress out of is this amazing kind of like a brushed cotton fabric. It is in my favorite burnt orange shade and I'm excited to have a go at making this style of dress out of this beautiful fabric. First things first, I need to have a good look at this dress and figure out how it's been constructed. To give the bust some shape, I can see that there are some darts in the bodice, and this dress doesn't have a lining, which will actually make this project a fair bit easier if I'm honest, and instead the raw edges have just been folded and stitched in place. I then try to figure out all the shapes of the fabric or the pattern pieces this dress has been made out of. And here is what I came up with. So now that I've got the shapes, it's time to figure out the measurements of the shapes. I'm going to start by making this pattern piece that will make up the bodice front. The thrifted dress is slightly too big for me, so I'm going to keep that in mind while I figure out the measurements for each pattern piece. To do this, I take my measuring tape and measure each seam. While figuring out these measurements, I've decided not to add any extra for seam allowance to the bodice to make it hopefully a little bit better for my size. Once I've got all the measurements, it's time to start drawing up the template piece. Here's a little bit of an example of what I was drawing based on the measurements I took from the garment. Next, I'm going to draw up this side back piece. As you can see, I often use the dress to get the shaping right, particularly when I'm drawing the armholes. I also like to lie the dress directly onto the pattern piece I've drawn just to make sure it's actually the correct shape and scale. After a few fails, I'm finally happy with this pattern piece. And lastly for the bodice, I'm going to draw up this shirred back panel piece. I found this bit easiest by actually stretching out the elasticated shirring and taking a measurement at its most stretched out state. At first I thought it was just a rectangle of fabric, but once measuring it out, it was more like a slight trapezoid shape. I then pinned my freshly made template pieces onto the fabric and cut them out. To make the bodice of this dress, I start by marking out the darts. I literally just copied the size of the darts directly from the dress, so hopefully they will turn out okay. I then fold and pin the darts. And then stitch them in place. Next I'm going to shirr the back panel piece. To do this, I hand wound some shirring elastic onto a bobbin and then changed my machine's tension to 5 when it's normally 4 and my stitch length to 3.5 when it's usually 2.5. I then lined up my presser foot along the raw edge of the fabric and started sewing. As the shirring elastic is stitched into the fabric starts to become elasticated and starts to gather up. I keep stitching rows of shirring, always lining up my presser foot with the previous row to keep the stitching nice and straight. Once the whole panel has been stitched, I give it a good press with my iron, and the heat and the steam of the iron actually helps to gather up the stitching even further. And before we start stitching up the bodice, let's take a moment to talk about the sponsor of this video. This video has been very kindly sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to run your business and launch your passion project. Whether you'd like to start making and selling your own products, build a portfolio to showcase your work, or simply create a landing page for your shop or restaurant, on Squarespace you can easily create your dream website all by yourself. Squarespace is so easy to use and you don't have to be tech savvy at all. You simply start by picking a site from their beautifully designed range of templates, which you can then change up as much as you like to suit your brand or personal style. And if you go to squarespace.com, you can get a free trial, which I totally recommend you do, so you can have a bit of a go yourself and see just how easy it is. Something that I really love about Squarespace is their award-winning customer service. Ever since I started my Squarespace website back in 2016, I've only ever had to contact them like 3 times with issues I've had with my website, and each time I've needed some help, they have been so helpful, friendly, and efficient, and have worked with me until the problem is 100% resolved. So if you'd like to create a beautiful website of your own, then like I said, head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and then when you're ready to launch your beautiful new website, head to squarespace.com/roseryapparel for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Next, with right sides together, I pinned the shirred panel to the side back pieces and stitched them together. I then like to use my overlocker after sewing each seam to neaten everything up and prevent the seams from fraying. Then, just like the original dress, I fold and press the top edge of the front to enclose the raw edge. I then also do the same for the back, which was a little bit trickier because of the shirring. And now it's time to figure out the sleeves. Just like with the bodice, I use my measuring tape to figure out the size and the shape of the sleeves. I was actually pretty surprised just how large the sleeves are, but I want to make my sleeves even puffier than the original dress, and so I decided to add an extra 20 centimeters or so to my sleeve template. Quite a few attempts to get the sleeves just right, and I added some notches to one of the curved sides to remind myself which armhole curve was for the back and which one was for the front. I also realised I didn't make my template long enough, so I wrote down a note to add an extra 3 centimeters or so to the length when cutting it out. As you can see, the sleeve template piece is massive and will hopefully give a good amount of puffiness to the finished sleeve. Then I measured my shoulder and cut 2 pieces of elastic at this measurement. I I then fold and press the top edge of the sleeve and stitch it in place to create a casing for the elastic I just cut. Once the elastic is threaded into the casings, I secure them by stitching the ends in place. I then pin the sleeves to the bodice pieces along the armhole curves, making sure to match up the curve with the notches to the curve of the bodice back. I then pin and stitch the non-notched curves to the bodice front. And my bodice is starting to come together nicely. Next I need to sew the sides of the bodice together and the sleeves together as well, so I start by sewing from the tip of the sleeve to the bottom of the bodice. I then fold and press the raw edges of the sleeve in twice. And stitch the fold in place, making sure to keep a little opening to be able to thread some elastic through in a minute. I then measure a length of elastic around my arm and cut 2 pieces out at this measurement. And then thread the elastic into the sleeve casings. Once thread all the way through, I stitch the 2 ends of elastic together with a zigzag stitch like this, and then stitch the small opening closed. And the bodice is done and it is looking super cute. Now it's time to make the template for the skirt. I actually found it really interesting that the front and back skirts are the exact same and there are no seams or darts for shaping in the skirt at all. It is literally just made up of one solid piece. Once I got all the measurements, I start to draw up the skirt template. And I ended up using the skirt of the dress itself as a guide for the curves of the skirt. Once again, I made the template slightly too short and so added a centimetre to the bottom for hemming, and hopefully that will be long enough. I then realised it would actually be easier to sew the skirts to the bodice separately and then stitch them together afterwards, and so I decided to unpick the bodice side slightly to make stitching the skirts to the bodice a little bit more easy. When pinning the skirt back to the bodice back, I made sure to stretch out the shirring as much as I possibly could, which once stitched in place will give the skirt back a slight gather. I then pin and stitch the bodice sides back together and stitch the skirts together at the same time. It's usually at this point that I add pockets to the side seams of my dresses, but I've recently had some issues where the side pockets have started to gape a little bit in more snug fitting dresses, so to prevent that, I sadly decided to give them a miss in this project. And then all that's left to do is hem the skirt. And my adorable duplicate dress is complete. So, how does it compare to the original? So pleased with how this dress turned out, and I'm so happy to finally have this style of dress in a fabric that I love. I just can tell it's going to be one of those dresses I wear all the time. I also think because the fabric is so thick, it's going to be a great dress for autumn, but in saying that, I'll also be able to get a lot of wear out of it in the warmer months as well. And not only do I have a dress out of this whole process, but I've also got the pattern for it. So if I ever did want to make another dress just like this one, I can easily do it now with the pattern I created. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you did enjoy this video, I would love it if you could give it a like and subscribe to this channel for more sewing type videos like this one. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next video.